Can I have everyone's attention? Excellent. You're such a good reader. Okay, we promised everyone to finish by 8:30. I know we have a couple of very hard-working team members. I want to make sure they get enough rest for tomorrow's long day. So I want to welcome everyone here, and thank you for the welcome that you have rolled out for AIA SDAT and the entire team. I want to thank Roz and Joost and Mariana and everybody else who has helped with the reception that you've given us, preparation, all the legwork, GIPAC, and many names that I'm not mentioning, but I'm not forgetting you. I just want to thank you for the wonderful welcome you have given Ann and I last time we were here, and now our team. Thank you very much. Was everybody here at the last meeting in April, or do we have some new people? Maybe show of hands. Who wasn't here in April? Oh, excellent. Perfect. Okay. I always feel bad about saying the same thing over and over again to everyone. So those of you who have heard this will bear with me, please. And I'm assuming everyone can hear me?
Barely.
Really? Barely? Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. So AIA, American Institute of Architects, for those of you who don't know, is an organization for architects and allied professionals. We have about 76,000 members around the country, and in Europe and Asia, people who have connections to the American profession here and who are working abroad are also members. And we are actually celebrating our 150th anniversary next year. It's going to be a very, very big year for us. But it's an organization that has a mission for its members to provide different things, professional services to its members, continuing education, outreach, contract documents, things like that. But there's also a very important component of AIA, which is its public outreach to communities around the country. And there was the RUDAT program, RUDAT, Rural Urban Design Assistance Teams, which was started back in the 60s. It's been going on for 40 years. It's a very, very successful program. It sort of set the model for this community process design charrette that we are doing here, that other organizations have started to do this also, use the same format. It's been very, very successful. And with the success of that program and the change in needs, they felt the need and sensed the need from communities to develop this Sustainable Design Assessment Team grant, the SDAT grant. And of course, as you know, your community has applied for that grant, and we felt that this was a fantastic community with a lot of potential and wonderful people here that we were very excited to offer the grant and come and work with you. So maybe a couple of breakdowns of what the SDAT program is about. One of the most important things is objectivity, and that's why we bring people from around the country, people who are usually outside to the community, so we have an objective view and assessment of the issues. The members are not paid, they're volunteer. AIA pays their expenses to come here, but their time is not compensated, and they also agree to not accept any work for a 3-year period after the report is issued. So that's sort of a way of making sure that this objectivity remains in place in reality and also in appearance for the community. There's also, very, very important in the process is the whole public participation. We want to make sure that whatever we are doing with the team, that the entire community gets involved and participates. Because as we all know, for planning to be successful, everybody needs to feel like they have a stake in that and that they have ownership and that their voice has been heard and that they feel like they've participated. So the design charrette roundtable model is a very important part of that, and these open community public sessions are also very, very important. So we look forward to your input tonight. And we had actually somebody in the audience earlier, am I seeing her, from the Planning Commission, who gave a wonderful definition of what charrette means. Is she here? No, she is not.
Yes,
she is. Oh, do you want to give that wonderful definition again? Because as an architect, of course, I know the actual French version, but you did such a fantastic job.
Let's see if I can remember it correctly. If I'm right. This charrette is a French word for little cars, and it dates back from the Beaux-Arts period when there was this intense design assignment to all these architecture students, and they worked for weeks and weeks. And at a certain point, little cart went through the streets of Paris to collect their work. And they had to have it ready, so in drawings from the time you see people at the very last minute hanging onto the edge of the cart, finishing their work as it was being pulled down the street. So that term has evolved into a style of workshop that you're going through, or all of us together are going through, where it's very intense. It's very, very goal-oriented. It's not dragged out, years and years of monthly meetings. And it has the potential for me. It's exciting for me because I think it can bring people together. I don't know if it's a panacea, but it's very hopeful to me that it can bring people together, whereas in other places we've seen a lot of divisiveness develop.
Great, thank you. That was very nice to speak to. So as was just described, we are doing this charrette roundtable process. We had our first afternoon today, and then tomorrow we have 2 more sessions, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. But we're sort of doing a mini charrette here, all of us together tonight, because we're going to ask you for your input. I will shortly introduce the rest of our team, but first of all, I'd like to introduce Ann Livingston, who's the director of the Center for Livable Communities at AIA. She sort of runs the show down there for us and determines who gets those grants and makes sure that everything runs smoothly. I'm Erica Geese. I'm an architect from Amherst, Massachusetts, and I'm the team leader for this SDAT. And I had participated in a few SDATs in Massachusetts last year, and that's how I got involved in this process. And then I will pass on the mic to the rest of our team. They will start here, and I'll let them introduce themselves. And then we can open the floor to questions, comments, and we can... Oh!
A few opening remarks.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Roz. Okay, very good. Okay, so, Warren, you're on.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Warren Flynn, previously from Washington, D.C., now from Seattle, Washington, for the last 4 weeks as of tomorrow. I'm an ecologist by training. After 25 years of being in universities and colleges around the country, I decided to do my own thing, so I work in the area of environmental sustainability as it relates to people's social and economic capacity concerns. Ironically, I've had a number of island experiences, so I sort of feel right at home with you all. I worked on a very wonderful place called Rathlin Island off the coast of Northern Ireland 2 years ago with a community for several weeks in terms of working with them to solve some of the problems that they had. I've had some experiences on Monhegan Island, which is off the coast of Maine, and really stands as a beacon of light out there for an island community achieving sustainability. And I've had some experiences with a fabulous island in the middle of Chesapeake Bay called Tangier Island. So I'm enjoying this experience, and I feel like I can relate with many of the concerns that you have, and I look forward to working with you all over the next couple of days and coming to some really thrilling and exciting opportunities for you all for the future.
Your focus, Warren, is on the aquifer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm leading the Aquifer Roundtable.
My name is Dave Stecker. I'm a mechanical engineer from Urbana, Illinois, where I work with the Ecological Construction Laboratory, which is a group that's building and designing housing that uses about 90% less energy than standard homes, just through a reduction in just consumption, as well as reducing the impact of the housing on the surrounding microclimate, and also its broader effect of in what materials are used in the house as well. And while I'm from central Illinois and have not much experience with being in the ocean regions, I've seen from the past day that there are a lot of parallels that can be drawn between communities struggling with developed issues where I'm from in central Illinois, and that's going on here. So even though the scenery is different, the challenges are very similar. and I'm heading up the energy group.
Thank you. I am equally happy to be here. My name is Glenn Acom. I am from Florida, the University of Florida, specifically in Gainesville. And I'm a landscape architect by training and do a lot of work related to sustainability. I formed with 3 other colleagues the Program for Resource Efficient Communities, which is a research group out of the University of Florida that deals with communities throughout the state of Florida to make their plans in their housing more sustainable in the broadest sense. I'm very happy to be here and to be involved with the Wildlife, Open Space, and Shoreline group.
Is this on? It is. My name is Walt Koznohovsky, landscape architect and planner, again from Western Massachusetts, not too far from Erica. We get to work together on occasion. And for a number of years, a good part of my professional career, I've been interested in the subject that we're looking at here with you, rural character, community building, what makes place, sense of place. And just haven't gotten started. The subject is big, it's certainly bigger than 3 days, but we're going to make as much progress. It's fortunate that you have done as much homework and there's as much available information and wisdom in the group that was sitting at the table with me today. I think that visual quality is a legitimate product of any landscape, and in some ways it's the first thing we look at and think about before we get engaged in other ways. And we tend to judge things by how they look, whether it's people, place, or whatever. So it's an important ingredient. It may quickly be not the most important, but it is among the important qualities that need to be looked at, and it's a way of getting at the bigger subject and the integration that I think is being talked about. I thought I would share just a few surprises. If I were sitting in your shoes, what am I surprised about having just been here for a few hours? And so these are the things that come to mind as I sat here for the few minutes as we began. First of all, I described an incredibly beautiful place to my wife on the phone this morning, much more than I suspected. I thought we'd have nice views, but looking out at Mount Baker and having it arise both before sunset and this morning. And so it's the island and the setting. Absolutely gorgeous place. No wonder you're here. The wisdom and the knowledge and the informed nature of all the folks that I'm meeting, it's unusual to be sure. Erica warned us this might be true. It certainly seems to be in my case. Unbelievable. The safety and security, being able to walk down the street, whether you're a deer or a dog or a person, and share it with the dogs, all the rest. The human scale that we're looking at, the comprehensible scale certainly of the island itself. It's big enough to be diverse and rich, as it certainly is, but it's also comprehensible. Not only because it's an island, but because it's the size that it is. The lack of pretension, pretty important one for me. You are presenting yourselves in an innocent way, and giving up that innocence and bringing in pretension is difficult. So it's a really important piece, and I'm certainly noticing that. Also, much of what's going on is hidden. Your homes are off the roads, they're not on the road front, except where they absolutely have to be in a few cases. You can't find the ferry terminal, there's no signs to it. So, lots of hiddenness. It really is a place, and a place is a space with lots of meaning. You tend to tolerate the individualness of people who choose to live on an island life, but you also welcome, it seems, the involvement in community-related things. So it's a wonderful balance, which I think most people in the world would like to strike as part of their lives. Certainly a great diversity in all of you sitting in this room and those that we've met today that aren't here. And not the least, I'll end with the issue of I'm impressed with the passion and the pride and the strength and the involvement that I see. It's just unusual and uncommon. So you're to be congratulated.
That was pretty good, Walt. But me, I'm here from the government. I'm here to help you. I've talked to a lot of other folks, there's two other places I call home. One is Las Vegas, and the other is a little town called Cripple Creek in Colorado. So I had worked in the government, but not for the federal government. I worked for the mayor in D.C. for 10 years. So at the state and local level, in a sense, because as you may know, as many of you know, D.C. is neither a state nor a city or a county. It's just a district. But it's the same size almost as the island is. It's a little bit smaller. It's only 6.5 square miles. I think the island's 8. And it's got a lot more population because we've got about 600 and some thousand people living there compared to what you got here. A little less than 1,000 during the wintertime anyway. So the issues, are different, but a lot of the issues are the same. And transportation is one of the areas where I'm working, especially with this charrette, and sort of looking at it. And of course I had my own transportation difficulties getting here. It took me 18 hours to get from home in DC to get to the San Juan Motel. I was able to spend 3 hours there this morning. But as Walt and I were talking, then the lady there said, "Well, it's 2 o'clock." And I says, "Where do I go to get the ferry?" She says, "Just walk up the street, just go right down the street." And that's all she said to me. So I walked out about 5:45, 6 o'clock this morning, and started walking down O Street instead of 6th Street. So I got down to the waterfront, and there was like nobody down there. I didn't see any ferry, and then all of a sudden I saw this one area where they were working in this fenced off area where you had to go through these gates and stuff. So I went over and said, "Where's the ferry to the island? Where's the ferry to Wellness Island?" And they said, "Oh, we see it every once in a while. We're over there. We see it over there, but that's all I can tell you." So then I started walking that direction, got back up finally all the way to 6th Street, and was going to catch the 6:30 ferry, and I caught it at 6:30. Just barely got on it. And I was the only passenger on it this morning. And I was thinking, what would happen when it's raining and blistery out there and you're standing out there, on that ferry? Because it didn't look like there was any place for pedestrians on the ferry other than stand out there behind all the cars and the trucks. So anyway, that was my introduction to the ferry. I paid my $2. So that was one of the areas that we talked about in the transportation sector today, is one of the transportation sort of issues. And it really does relate to the fact that you're on an island and you've got to figure out how you're going to get back and forth from mainland to the island. And right now, you've got pretty much one mode of transportation for doing that. So that's something that needs to be, talked about and looked at, and sort of is part of, probably the key of your transportation policy here on the island. The other 2 areas we looked at was the whole sort of road and infrastructure that you have in place, and then just looking at the different types of alternative modes of transportation that you have on the island, and how you might be wanting to sort of look at that. So we got into some pretty heavy discussion this afternoon, and it kind of wore me out after 3 hours. So I let Roz and Bill and a few other folks kind of take the lead, and I'm hoping most of you will show up tomorrow with me, because I'll be here tomorrow. And I think we should have a great session tomorrow, and we'll come up with some good ideas.
So thank you. I just wanted to thank this team for agreeing to join me in on this. So thank you very much. So I have one announcement to make before I forget. Tomorrow, at the end of the roundtables, Dave Stecker has brought a video about the work he's been doing. Some of you might be interested in that. It's about a half-hour long. I think it's in German, right? But he will provide English commentary translation live. And if any of you are interested in alternative building construction and passive house, for those of you who are familiar, Dave will be showing a video about that. Well, we finish our last roundtable, I guess, at 5. So maybe a few minute break after that. We'll probably be running a little bit late. Dinner's at actually dinner's, we're just on our own for dinner tomorrow. Okay, we're potluck. So maybe between the roundtables and dinner, we'll let Dave get set up somewhere, give him a little chance to breathe after the roundtables, and then for those of you who are interested before dinner, you're welcome to join in with that. And then at some point also, Warren brought an inspirational slideshow with some music that is about 6 minutes long, and we'll set that up somewhere to maybe middle of the day for break for those of you who want to see that. And then there was one thing I wanted to throw in here that came out of Walt's great leadership here. And it was mentioned for those of you who were at the debrief session this afternoon. Walt gave everybody a little homework assignment. And I think homework assignments like this are a lot of fun. So I'm going to pass this on to everybody, and you can interpret it, you can skew it towards your interests. But the first question was, what does sustainability mean to you? So that's something I would like everybody to think about. And we can give a brief definition, but I'll let you decide if you want to hear what our definition is, maybe. And then we can go over that a little later. Then the second question was, actually I might be wrong about the order, but what about the history of Guaymas Island should influence this place? So that's something to think about. Again, can be applied to any of the topics. And then the last one is, this island needs to answer this question. And what would that question be? So something for all of you to leave with later on and think about tonight, and whether you're joining us tomorrow or not, maybe you can send emails or somehow share your thoughts with us at some point, or even tonight during the discussion. But
I was going to say, one thing we can do is we can roll out a big sheet of paper and put some markers around, and people can just
here we are. That would be great. And we actually have rolls of paper, so maybe we'll do that as part of the evening tonight. So that's it for I think the floor is yours. Actually, I know the floor is yours.
Yeah, I decided to postpone the thank you list until Thursday. But I think Roz has some introductory remarks she would like to make now.
I thought what I would try to do is talk a little bit about some of the issues that we were thinking about when we wrote the grant, and provide a little bit of a framework for sustainability to help answer the questions that Walt, help you answer the questions that Walt and the SDOT team has asked of us. And so you may recall about a year or two ago, we did an opinion survey and asked people what they value, what they think is important about the island, and almost universal agreement on the things that people really cherish about this place: the quality of life, the sense of safety, quiet, the easy pace, and clean drinking water, the rural landscape, wildlife, woodlands, wetlands, open space, undeveloped shorelines, and open vistas. We all pretty much agree on that. So those are places that we can, we may have differences as people, but I think those are all places where we can start a discussion anyway. And then to talk a little bit about our future. The population trends, and this is like GIPAC's analysis, looking at the lot patterns right now, and this is indicative of some of the choices that we will be making, or we will have to be making here in the future. Currently, we have 627 homes on the island, roughly 800 residents year-round, and up to about 3,000 people during the peak season, which is the weekends during the summer. And build out, which is when every lot that can be subdivided on the island under the zoning, legally under the zoning, is built upon, there's a potential for 1,615 homes, or if roughly 2 persons per household would be roughly 3,200 year-round residents, and we haven't really thought about how to calculate whether there's a peak season or not, or what that would mean. But and I keep in mind that there's a certain number of those lots which might not be developable because they might be in the middle of a wetland or in the middle of a stream or something like that. But it's more likely that we'll probably end up in the 2,400 potential number of homes. So just to give you an order of magnitude of...
Homes or people?
Oh, people, excuse me. Thank you. I wanted to just read something here to see if Gary Davis wrote a poem that relates to the vision for Guaymas Island and a sub-area plan. And I just want to see if you think this rings true for the island. So just let us know what you think. It says, welcome. As you walk here, step gently. Enjoy the young raven in the ancient fir tree that shades the cattail marsh just up from the beach. Sense the harmony of the islanders as they go about with an unhurried pace, a kind wave of the hand for all passers-by. Admire the quiet. Breathe the peace we all try to preserve for each other. And do no harm here to our place, to our home. What do you think? So I thought we could talk a little bit about some of the forces that are operating here. The forces that are maintaining kind of a steady state on the island. We do have rural designation under the Growth Management Act. That means this island was identified as a place that should remain rural, as distinguished from cities, Anacortes, for example, where there's higher density development, where there's infrastructure, sewer, water, roads, and so forth to support higher densities. The idea is that places like Guaymas Island are intended to have limited infrastructure. Roads are, don't have any curbs or gutters. There's no sidewalks. There's no culverts. They're open drainage systems. Those sorts of things. They're intended to be low expense type areas where the government does not need to put a lot of money into it because the intent is that the population would remain low. So that's a force that's operating to keep this island rural. We have an open space lands program. Much of the land, I think 30 or 40% of the land on the island is in an open space taxation program for either agriculture, forestry, or just open space, which is for biological diversity. And that gives landowners a tax break for maintaining the land in that state. We have relatively low cost living, relatively speaking, even though we complain. Taxes are relatively low, or maybe relative to the future, and independence from off-island utilities. I think our greatest strength, and it's been referred to here tonight already, is the rich social economic diversity in this community. We have people from all walks of life, farmers, artists, carpenters, homemakers, professionals of all ages, high income, low income, and of course, the occasional rural character. And then there are forces that are operating to move growth forward and upward. It's a very hot real estate market. That means accelerated growth. And this is something that's a very important concept because the rate of growth is very important. If we grow very quickly, some of the things we talked about today involve public education, for example, maintaining your septic system properly, not overpumping your well, maintaining the woodland setting that you have. And as you get an accelerated growth in population, it becomes our job to educate people about some of these issues and you get to a point where it becomes unmanageable with more and more population, and so it kind of gets out of hand. It's hard to manage it, and so it's something that we just need to be mindful of in looking at, you know, what the population rate is, and as more and more people come, what the response is in terms of, you know, what is needed to maintain the sustainability of this island. The issue of open space, those lands that are in open space, it's very important that people understand that this is a temporary state of the land. The land can be taken out of the open space program at any time if an individual wants to pay the back taxes, and it can be then subdivided and developed. Just in terms of the number of structures, there are currently 427 homes on the shoreline that could be built, that are in existence, excuse me. At built out, there would be like a total of 943 homes. If you look inland, we will see probably in the next 10 to 20 years that some of the larger tracts of land that are in open space have the potential of being converted to residential uses, particularly the larger land holdings. There's now 199 structures inland. At build-up, there would be roughly 658 homes, if all of those lots were developed again. And so we are kind of at a fork in the road, and we're very fortunate to be able to make conscious choices about our future. There is an increasing potential for property tax increases, especially as larger scale structures are built and property taxes increased for maybe neighboring properties. We know there's going to be increasing energy costs as costs of fuel and power rise. There is the what's called the Growth Management Urban Lands Assessment, which is a process that the county goes through periodically to update the amount of land relative to the projected population in the area. So for example, as Anacortes builds out and there's a reassessment done and they find that there's not enough land in Anacortes to accommodate the population, guess where they start looking? They look at the surrounding rural areas to accommodate that additional growth. And I'm not saying that the county would, you know, start looking at Guaymas Island necessarily, but, you know, we are kind of within that sphere. So I'm just mentioning that. I'm not putting words in the county's mouth at all. We know we can expect longer ferry lines with increasing population, and we know we have the potential of aquifer depletion and degradation of quality if people are not careful about how they pump their wells, how they what they put on the land, and what eventually goes into the aquifer. We do not want to be in a position where we become a so-called health emergency, where water has to be supplied to the island from off-island. The cost of running lines is somewhere between $50 and $100 a running foot, and this would have a horrible effect, especially a very perverse effect on larger landowners, I'm sure, who could not sustain the cost of those assessments. So I don't want to paint a gloom and doom picture here, but I do want people to be aware of the choices that we need to be making into the future. And then just talk briefly about some of the pieces that we talked about this afternoon that go into the sustainability puzzle for Guaymas Island: preserving rural landscape, wildlife, and rural character, protecting the aquifer quality and quantity, fostering social and economic diversity and a sense of community, promoting alternative transportation modes, maintaining independence from costly off-island power and fuel sources, and continued affordability for all that live here. And to kind of paraphrase Al Bush Sr. today, to strive to ensure that the next generations have the same quality of life that we enjoy now, and that's kind of my definition. And some others who have talked about the issue of sustainability. And so, given these challenges, this is enter the AIA SDOT team to help us to use what tools are out there to provide information, to give us guidance, to create sustainable conditions here. So I think we have maybe a few minutes for questions if you have of me. Otherwise, let's turn it over to the expert panel and fire away.
Changes that we could anticipate in the next, say, 10 to 15 years, and that is expectations, and nobody seems to address it. My sense is that a lot of people come to the island with growing expectations as to what will make a comfortable life, how many square feet is needed, how many bathrooms, how many tennis courts, that kind of thing, and that doesn't appear there. Quality of life is pretty nebulous. It is attached to expectations, and we are in America, and they're pretty high. And I wonder why that hasn't come up.
It's a great question, and I'm going to turn it over to the panel because I think this is not an uncommon problem, and hopefully they can help us to.
I have a real short question. Does the DNR property in the middle count as the developable land in the island?
I do believe it does, in the sense that that land could be sold or converted. Although I do think they generally try to offer an option to the local community to purchase. Yeah, if they desire.
Wait, we own it as a state, and it's still up for development.
It could. It totals 3 parcels. It totals 3 parcels, and those parcels weren't included in that.
They were not. Okay, thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Just for those of you standing back here, there are several seats up here in the front. Please don't be bashful. Same over here. There are lots of seats here in the front. 3 rows, 4 rows. I see some on the side. Please feel free to sit down. Well, we've been sworn to secrecy here. In the sense that, I'm going to address the issue of expectations. This is something that we are talking about, and I think a lot of you have been giving thought to that in the fact that you have asked us to come here and help you with looking at your future in a sustainable way. And addressing the issue of expectations for people who are coming here from outside and are not aware of that, that's a big issue, a very big issue. And we are going to talk about that now, but I think if you kind of reverse that and look at yourselves from the outside, I think you might find a little bit of an answer there too. But we are going to address that in our recommendations. But we're not at the point tonight of giving answers yet. We really want to hear what your questions are. So that's how I'll introduce this next phase here, that we really get your questions, your concerns. We want to hear everything, get everything out on the table. And then we will start formulating ideas, concepts as we go through the day tomorrow, and then at the presentation on Thursday night, we will present our recommendations. But that's the secrecy we've been sworn to, so to speak. Not really.
We have our own expectations of what we want in terms of our living style and how we want to live. And not everyone lives the same way, and everyone has their own individual sort of bent in terms of how they want to live. And what happens is that then you have to kind of come together as a community and figure out how your lifestyle is then going to affect your neighbor and vice versa, and what the trade-offs are, and how you can end up living in harmony. And that's the question that you're facing here. You do have some restrictions, as was mentioned by Roz, in terms of sort of the limits that have been put on growth, just in sort of the regulatory kind of fashion here. So that you've got sort of a parameter out there now that you're starting to work within. But it gets right down to what you said. If you want 3,000 homes here on the island versus like the 680,000 people we have in DC and less space than you have here, You're not going to have that because you've already got some limitations in terms of what you can have. But, you know, it comes down to, do you have the resources to sustain the lifestyles of you know, this diverse mix of what people want?
Will the panel address some macro expectations, for instance, limiting the amount of energy that could be allotted to the island or that kind of thing, which are very controversial, obviously. We're a very individualistic society, but it seems to me that some address has to be made on some macro expectations, housing built with our 5,000 or something, you know, those kinds of issues that almost to me have to be addressed or it isn't going to work.
Yeah, and those I think are the issues we're addressing, and those are the things we want to look at. And what you want to do is start thinking a little bit outside the box, because you may or may not have limits in some ways in terms of the amount of resources you have available to you for power production here on the island, and how you use those resources. And you just started to touch on some of the resources you have available, but there's, you know, tidal waves and all kinds of other kinds of energy sources and geothermal and stuff that even haven't even gotten into talking about. But again, there's also a lot of assistance out there that we haven't also started to talk about that you can also bring in as you go into this process to help. And when I was kidding, I said here we go going to help. But there really are a lot of good people out there, laboratories in the federal government that have all kinds of experts that you can tap into through the county government, through the state government, and so forth, and both technical resources as well as some financial resources to help you as you go through the process of taking your plan, getting it put together, and starting to implement it, and being able to really look at, you know, the wide range of types of technologies that are available to you. So what you don't want to do is go away thinking that there's nobody out there that can help you sit down and sort of find a solution to what you're trying to grapple with, because there are solutions.
I'd just like to interject something here with regards to this overall issue of expectations too. One of the significant things about what you all have engaged yourself in by participating tonight and hopefully through the rest of this process is something that we like to refer to as taking charge of your own destiny. And this is the beginning of that, and that's really the reason why we're here, is try to help you to do that. We ask a lot of questions, we delve down deep into some of the things behind the issues that you identify and the concerns that you have. But at the end of the day, what our true job is to work with you in a way that will allow you to take charge of your own destiny as a community, not as an individual, but as a community. And as a community to be able to define those boundaries that you perceive as important to sustain the lifestyle that is seen as a vision for this place through time. And it is that taking charge of your own destiny that is really going to be very influential in shaping the expectations of people who come here in the future. And I think that's going to be very important. When a community takes charge of its own destiny in that way, it tends to have a great deal of influence in terms of where that community moves down the road and how that community gets there. And it all has to do with shaping those boundaries.
Well, I'd love to add just a tidbit. This is a good audience to be making that point to, because good reason, at least I and I think the members of the team are here, is that we see a good bit of that going on currently. There isn't an aluminum plant here probably because there's some concerted efforts on at least part of some of you. So you're making choices, and many of them wise. You wouldn't have the theme and the order and the beauty and everything that we've just mentioned without having made some good choices. But one of the things, this is only by way of observation that seems to be true, is that even small changes and single changes can be disproportionately impactful in your situation because of the order and coherence and theme that you currently have. And so it becomes all the more, and it's also the beginning, potentially, a fear, I suspect, of a trend that you wouldn't want to see accelerate and get out of hand. So this is the time to be talking about things, and if buildings are getting bigger than you want, you need to examine most carefully why you're concerned about that. And I certainly don't want you to take it at face value. I want to see if we can help you dig deeper to understand what it is that is of concern. Articulating the concern can lead to solutions, but it need not.
Making a recommendation as to political organization to fulfill these goals, will that be one of your suggestions?
You mean on the island?
Right.
We will be making recommendations that, our recommendations will, the goal is to assist the community in the creation of the sub-area plan. So as far as political structure goes, anything that involves decision-making on an island level that would enhance getting you from point A to point B, yes, those could be possible recommendations. In regards to the county, that, I think that's up to you to decide as a community, but we're staying within the bounds of the island and what your goals are, basically, to say. So, I don't know if that answers your question.
No.
Okay.
Well, you're probably aware there's a little bit of an adversarial relationship between Wings Island and the three county commissioners,
Yes.
currently anyway.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, one of the ways, if the panel comes up with strong suggestions that we all adopt, then there's the matter of how do we implement those suggestions. Even though we have a planning process, they have a planning process on Hidalgo Island, which was just thrown in the trash.
And they are aware of that. I actually spent the afternoon with the commissioner, who was incredibly supportive of this process and is very, very thrilled to see this happening. Now, Commissioner Monk? Give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And to all of what everybody's saying here, I mean, this is, if that's what he's saying it sincerely. I mean, if he doesn't say it sincerely, as far as I'm concerned, it's his problem, not mine. So, anyway, we're giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. He gave me the appearance of being supportive of this, but he did clearly state, okay, it's up to you to, through self-determination, to create this plan, and then it has to go through the process of checking against GMA requirements, guidelines, directives, against the comprehensive plan, how that fits in with the county goals, and there'll be a lot of going back and forth with the planning staff, with the commissioners, with the county planning board, and it's going to be a long process. This is just the beginning. That's, I think I'm paraphrasing him fairly accurately. But overall, he was very supportive of this, to the point that he would like to see the same process in Hidalgo, because Hidalgo, yes, is a disaster, and he gets, you know, what? Okay, well.
Speak to the whole audience.
Is people are starting to make a recognition of the fact that it's not necessarily our population that makes the impact, it's our consumption levels that are making the impact. And that individually, our consumption levels personally can expand our footprint outside of this island, outside of this county, outside of this nation. And it can happen very quickly. You look at local businesses, for instance, and how currency stays within local economies, or it leaves local economies rather quickly. That this is something that we're all starting to recognize, and that even within our choices in home building, our choices in home design, our choices in infrastructure design, how we treat our water, how we deal with our energy, how we deal with our food systems, how we deal with our housing, transportation, all that is starting to come to a head right now. And it is doing that because if we don't make certain choices right now, there will be certain disastrous effects that will inevitably come about. I think that most people here recognize that, and that's why we're here. And we understand all of that and want to see that. We want to see positive effects due to our energy and our input, and we want to see that come out. We see that there are certain people in place in our governing bodies that will make our efforts ineffectual.
People are trying to do, and here's what being in pathfinders in your county at least, and also in the region. And I think that's something that is a real strength and will serve you well in the long run. So.
And too, in this county, we have had like the first, there's builders on this island who have in effect the first black water systems that were code approved, the first drain catch systems that were code approved, the first straw bale homes that were code approved. And so in a sense, this island has been a driving force in all of that already, and this is another step in the process.
And we're here to support that. So, shall we go row by row? Yes? Or, well, we'll skip to you. Go ahead.
is one of the things we can expect a toolkit that would support whatever recommendations, whatever the intention of the island is, based on your collective wisdom and experience that would give us a running start on implementation of some of the conclusions. And second of all, maybe this is for Rolf. Yeah, I'd be really interested, given your experience, of how you could describe to us in this dialogue some of the tipping points that you observe that cause an irretrievable change of direction in the community, things that you might be particularly acutely aware of. The way they do now is we have one of everything, and so you have to make it work. So my hunch is if we had two of everything, there would be two groups meeting tonight. Talking about that. I don't know if that's true or not, but I suspect there's some tipping points in the sense of
Thank you. So we're going to start, we're writing all these down. Maybe
We think that's important because it does take you from the planning stage to the implementation stage. And that's where you want to get with this process. So you don't want to just be planning, you don't want to have a ferry committee that's put in place, that's been there for 20 years and has never had any action that's resulted from its recommendations. And so I think what you're looking for, are ways to start taking some action steps. What we're trying to do here is to help you set that stage for you to take those action steps and to start helping provide you with sort of the resources and help them put resources in your hands, which are basically a toolkit, whether it's personnel or other types of materials or other kinds of assistance that we can offer, but it in a sense forms a toolkit for you to work with to start an implementation strategy. And I think that's where you want to head, and I'm hoping that's where we'll be able to help give you that assistance.
Is really not there. There's some inventories that haven't been done, and maybe more of a management plan looking to increase what can be increased or maintain the status quo. And in those cases, I think we may be recommending actions to take to learn more about the resource.
I think that the Department of Fish and Wildlife already treats Guimas as a distinct and discrete area. So I think for your resources, you might consult with the Department of Fish and Wildlife because they already manage this island as a discrete area for both hunting and fishing and grabbing.
You're an expert in transportation, in building, in power and utilities, etc. Is there somebody that discusses human development? Should there be more clubs on the island? Should there be are there too many of them?
to a question that somebody else had, and it was on the top of the list, maintaining community. And that's part of it. And actually a lot of our team members were asking about that. So, what happens on the island? How often do islanders get together? Because driving around, you don't see many houses and you don't see any people. And aside from what the ferry and Anderson store and the landing, or just the fact of having to wait online at the ferry, what little community that creates if you're in a car as opposed to walking, where we were wondering, that was also my first question when I first came. What is the sort of vehicle for public interaction and social dialogue on your island? And you have a lot of clubs. You do have a lot of things, and maybe you need more. And
there's a church.
And you have
please remember that there is a church.
No,
is currently, after a lot of work that the islanders did and had a hydrogeologic study, baseline study done, the current county GMA, sole source aquifer language, refers to the recharge areas on Guimas Island. If you call the county and ask them where those are, and they even say that there is a map, they say it's the 100-foot radius around each wellhead. Can you help us define or find the money to define the aquifer recharge areas? Have you had that kind of experience before? And the second question is, there's also reference in the GMA to a seawater intrusion policy for the county, but one does not exist. You might bring that up to Mr. Monks the next time. But the aquifer recharge areas is a pretty critical question, I think, going forward.
It's a very critical question, and believe me, it came up a number of times in today's roundtable discussion from a number of different points of view. A recharge area is not that easy to define. One of the things that we discussed extensively in the roundtable today was the complexity of aquifers, and in particular the complexity of the aquifers that exist for Guaymas, as is detailed in that 1996 study, that there are potentially 3 and maybe 4 aquifers that overlap. And being also able to see a positive direction forward. And what that entails beyond this community, or what that represents beyond this community, is often significant. And if Guaymas Island sort of gets the reputation that they are a stable community, they are a community that has opinions that are founded on good information and on a value of life and what it represents and so forth, and that there are certain ways of living on this island that are expected, and that's the way the community as a whole performs and agrees to, I'm not sure anybody would want to join your nudist colony that does not see in that same way. And I think, that's one of the ideas of the sense of community. That really, those communities that are successful in this world and aren't finding themselves in court every time they turn around are the communities that can really establish that sense for well-being for each other and working as a group towards a common goal. And that's what's special about this process, because it provides the incentive, it provides the linchpin, if you will, of being able to move in that direction. Then it's in your hands in terms of how you carry it out. But these kinds of processes are a start in that direction. And it's just how much you put into it and carry it forward.
I'll add a piece that have, and I'm not remembering the names now, so it's a bit embarrassing, but who have articulated their values in more than just a verbal way at a meeting. They've taken their zoning bylaws and taken them the next second and third step, produced documents saying, if you move into this community, these are the things we value, and these are the things that it would look like to get our blessing and our approval, and these are the things that we find it hard to approve. Not that they might be out of bounds, but you create a workbook, and I've actually participated in doing a couple of these, how to build well in our community, and make your values extant. There's power in collective values if you can find your way to coming to agree on what those things are, and sharing them in a very specific way for someone who's making those hard choices of building a home on a site. And I've written books actually about building effectively in that regard. So that might be something this community would wish to undertake, to go the next step so that you can have a chance to at least share your values clearly, and even if it doesn't affect everybody, it may affect some. And that's already progress.